Reflective Podcast.
Noisy when I drink this?
Let's see. No, it's great. It's great sound effects. We can tell you're not AI. Welcome back. This is the Fully Reflective Podcast. I'm Rocco, and I'm here with my brother Brent. Brent, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here.
Yeah. We were just talking about AI, which I'm learning a lot about it. And there's this Chat GPT thing, which is probably the most, I don't know, it's getting some fame and traction lately, but there's all of these web browser extensions that you can add to. It's like you download it as a program and you install it into your laptop, your computer, and then it acts as an extension in Chrome. And then your web browser basically becomes more intelligent and can do side like projects while you're doing normal things because of what you're telling it to do. And there's one that, Alyssa just found and Brother Hermes just told us about, that you can put audio in, you can put text in, and you can put video in, and it'll basically, if it's audio or video, it'll transcribe the whole thing, and it'll give you a character arc, or not character arc, but like a story arc of what happens in this piece of media. And then here's the kind of most potential highlight moments, most potential viral moments, and here's the hashtags for them, and here's a clip, and here's the captions as well. Pretty cool.
Have you tried it and it was effective?
Yes, just started using it for Dad's podcast actually, and otherwise, God help us all, got to sit through a bunch of who knows how to look for his highlights.
And that's what everybody has always had to do that was an editor.
Yeah.
Just that's the most time-consuming part, is trying to find the best parts and phrases, and trying to shape the story and create it and then have it coherent. But the concept that AI is able to just do that for you is mind-blowing. That not only can it select between who's talking, like that seems easy enough that it can do that. It can
identify
detect, okay, which camera has audio that's more prevalent. Okay, I select that. That makes sense. But beyond that it can actually understand the communication that's taking place and say, oh, like what you said, this is something that's really popular right now. Yeah, a lot of people are searching for this, what you just communicated, so it's going to make that its own little segment. That is insane.
Wild.
What's it called?
Well, I actually don't know. Oh, that one is called Opus. OPUS.
It makes sense. Creating your opus.
Creating the magnum opus, which you might know a thing or two about. Quick little backstory on Brent Okuley, which I thought was pronounced Okuley at first, but it's not. It's like the eyeglass.
That's right.
Brand. So we only met last year, and that was briefly, and you were Dad's tour manager for a window on that tour, but then you were TM this whole tour, and then actually capstoned it by being front of house, audio, in charge. And I'm wowed by you because you, like me, are I would say a multi-hyphenate. And I think the multi-hyphenate is, honestly, it is the modern term for what was once called the Renaissance man.
I love that.
And since I've been, I'd say like at age 19, I saw, there's 3 dudes that I really saw. You could say maybe 4. Ryan Leslie, Pharrell Williams, Kanye West, and then Justin Timberlake for me was like, for some reason, those, like, it was an archetype of just, I was super magnetized to it. Doug Banker had several talks with me. He was like, you have to choose one thing. And I was just, it feels so incongruent with who I am. I get that that's the formula. I get that that's what works. And I get that you'll probably feel better about me being related to you if I'm locked in on one thing. But man, it feels so unnatural for me. And I've seen my father, yes, did one thing really, really specifically well, but blossomed into a culture of things that were really seemingly separate things, but they're super connected to a thread of identity, to a calling, to a mission. That's this take apart a car, tons
Mhm.
of pieces, but they're
Mhm.
cohesively functioning as one unified system. And yeah, so the Renaissance man. So I know a little bit about your background, and I'm wowed by it. I saw you pick up a guitar this summer after having never seen you pick up a guitar, and you begin thrashing. I was like, when did this happen? When did you begin? You're like, you know, a different life. I was doing this.
Right.
So I like to, like, I call it batons. Like I have
Mhm.
the baton, I just pass you the baton, but um this podcast is called Fully Reflective because for me, I love talking to people about their most powerful life experiences. I like to
Mhm.
go right into shit, dude. If we died tomorrow, like, did we talk about the most like the most
Mhm.
pressing stuff? Did we use our time in the most, you know, wise way, really?
Yeah.
And spirituality and trauma and belief systems and psychedelic experiences and this word that you might have heard me say, moon. It's kind of like my I just wrote a book, and it's the foundation of a philosophy and a brand that I am cultivating through. That moon for me means missing out on nothing,
Mhm.
because you know, FOMO and the feeling that we people can miss out on something is super real. A lot of people are not living their most lit life, but when someone's living a lit life, they're inspired, they're activated. And like
Yeah.
a full moon, it's like, boy, that's that sunshine is reflecting off of that person.
Yeah.
And watching my dad this whole time since I was a kid, it's like been my life work of like, what is going on? You know, all these people, I don't know, like if I were to walk out into the crowd with a microphone and interview everybody, I unfortunately guess 90% of the people probably aren't living their dreams or anything close to it. Probably
For that
really
night, it feels like they are.
for that night, they're probably more inspired than normal, which
Mhm.
again made me even more curious. Is like, wow, well then what is it to be one in alignment with your dreams and your calling and your mission, and utilizing your gifts in a way that not only one can pay your own bills and fulfill your daily, but then it can serve others and help others and can be a
Mhm.
gift and a blessing to others. I was so fascinated by that, and ultimately, yeah, led me to this term of to be fully reflective, I think, of God's will and of the creator's impulse. Another way to say it
Mhm.
is you will reflect that same condition, you know,
Yeah.
as above so below, as within so without, made in the like image of the creator. All these kind of renditions of that same idea. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a fun, swirling, non-linear way to present a question as to like, who is Brent
Mhm.
Oakley? And I know you're up to some fun things, but how has your journey led you to the current focal point that you're in right now, being inspired, and what is inspired living to you?
Okay. Yeah, it's a lot to
I
try to
like,
tackle.
like I said, a big garden. It's a big garden to talk inside of.
Yeah, I've got some things that were punctuated in my mind as you were saying that. The Renaissance man, that's something that honestly I love that you touched on that and you said that specifically because I have always felt that I identify like that. There's that, like a jack of all trades, right? There's the saying that jack of all trades, master of none, still so much better than a master of one.
Mm,
And yeah, like somebody that is a master of one thing, they may do that better than anybody else that does that one thing, but that's it. That's that's their trick, right? That's all they've got.
yeah,
When you can do anything, really anything that you're interested in, and you pursue it, you learn it, and you become adept at it. I don't know. That's just more satisfying to me. Um, like part of why my entire life, I'm 43, my entire life, it was always a challenge for me to work a job, right? Because I just could not fathom the concept that I would be at this one place indefinitely. And I mean, most people don't ever think that way, like, okay, I'm going to be here until the day that I die. But it's my mind just goes there, just like fast forwards. I'm signing up for this place. And it's like, I can't do this forever. I can't
yeah,
just do this one thing. I'm burned out just thinking about it, right?
yeah.
Now, if I know that there's a lot of variety involved and it's interesting and it's something that I really want to do at the time, well, then I'm going to be all in on it. until there's something else that's like, okay, well, I've figured that out. I feel like I've kind of hit the peak of what my capability is going to be with that thing. And obviously, for the conversation right now, it's a job, but it can be hobby, it can be any endeavor. But it's just as soon as you kind of like plateau on that, like you've hit some measurable level of competency with it, say, okay, I'm going to the next thing now. And then that other thing, you can always pull back. You can always like fall back onto like, oh, that's right. I remember how to do this. I worked a summer doing this one year. Okay, so now I'm just going to pull that out of my tool belt, right? And now I go back to doing that, even though like these people that know me that are regular parts of my life, they had no idea that I could even do something like that. And that's kind of what you're talking about. You know,
with the
you
guitar.
see exactly like you saw me as Ted's tour manager. And so I'm in that mode and in that mindset. And of course, last year on the tour, when I was pulled in to take over the last leg of it, there's really no time for me to just like settle in. I'm just like go, 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 and then it's done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas coming into the tour this year, doing it from the start all the way to the end, I had a full 6 weeks, and then plus the last two shows that got tacked on that I just flew up to and did, and that was great. Um, but I felt much more comfortable. I felt more myself. I felt like connected to everybody that was there, and especially since I was starting from the beginning of it instead of coming in and trying to be like, hey, I'm the new guy, I'm just here to take over and fix what I can do and carry what I need to carry and then be out. This time it's okay, we're all starting from zero together. We're going to get this to the end, right? So that allowed me to have more freedom to kind of step into my own character when you and I, like for example, had moments of downtime on the road when we could connect and have conversations about anything and everything under the sun. So of course there was kind of like an ebb and flow, and there was moments like before one of your dad's meet and greets, for example, we have all the guitars in the room, and I just walked in and picked one up and just started playing it. There was like downtime. There was nothing happening at that moment.
Yeah.
It was just an organic thing that happened. And you're like, what? You play guitar? I'm like, yeah. What else do you do? And but I don't know. I think part of that is because I don't know, maybe I'm just never truly I can never be satisfied in the sense that like I do something and I'm content and that's all I need and now I can go to sleep and check out, right? Like I love to be content. I love to be self-reliant and self-content in the sense that I don't need more, but it's also because I have a creative mind and I'm curious. There's just always something else that's going to pique my interest that I want to pursue as well.
So
So,
you're a spiritual man, yeah?
of course.
So how do you connect your relationship, your very private relationship with God, to this balance of noticing the importance of contentment, but
Mhm.
as I'm sure as a athletically driven man as well, or at least want to be healthy, sometimes the inspiration to supersede contentment's threshold is actually the calling of excellence. Like
Mhm.
contentment is in a kind of way a counterbalancing weight that is needing to be bust through at some point, like in a workout. Like, yeah, I did 10 push-ups, I'm content. It's like I think there's a thing I'm pointing at here. It's
I think
like
it's
it,
balance.
it's the connect, but the connection to like spiritually feeling alive and knowing when you're content, but also knowing when you're like inspired to go to another extent and another
Mhm.
threshold. And yeah, like how does that get cultivated in you, and what's your relationship been with that?
Okay.
Because
Definitely speak to that.
one last thing on that, because you're gardening, you're building a freaking, you know what I mean, and that uses, I mean, I'm sure you're playing many roles in that. The music making, you're in charge of an audio situation. There's a lot to know. There's creativity. There's logic. So I see you as an archetype of this Renaissance situation where
Yeah, so maybe I should give like a brief like overview of kind of like the variety
or
that has happened
schematics,
in my life,
yeah,
right?
a little bit of that,
For some background,
and how, and then maybe connect it to a thesis of like, what are you following?
right?
What breadcrumb are you? What breadcrumbs are you following over here?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, when I was young, I played sports as a kid. I did that. I grew up skateboarding, snowboarding. I taught myself to play guitar. Started playing guitar when I was 13. I played in a punk band for a long time, which was just a three piece. My younger brother played bass, who I think you met on tour, really tall guy, my younger, taller brother.
Yep.
And then our best friend played drums. We were called Jasper. A lot of fun doing that. I've always played music. I've always been interested in it. My mom was a piano major in college, so we grew up always hearing her play piano in the house. She had like a baby grand in her piano room, so we would always hear that. And then, incidentally enough, we never took lessons to play piano, and maybe she tried to teach us a couple times, but we were just too crazy, and so it never stuck. But we were always around it. And then one day, I think she bought a guitar for like 10 or 20 bucks at a garage sale. Old generic guitar, super beat up. She brought it home. She took a couple lessons and then she lost interest. And then I picked it up and then I just started strumming on it, trying to figure stuff out, like learn rhythms. I didn't know anything. I literally would just like put all my fingers across the strings and just like move the whole thing. I'm like, I don't know what to do. And then I finally learned like some major and minor chords. And then there was a friend one day that came over and he showed me a power chord. He showed me how to play Teen Spirit by Nirvana. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was like mind blowing. It just unlocked everything for me. I felt like, so I would play guitar for like 8 hours a day when I could growing up. So that was a big part of my life. But yeah, like, man, I remember at one point thinking that I had worked more jobs than anyone I've ever met. I feel like I've had like 20 or 30 different jobs, like different like fields, that I did like as I was growing up. Maybe I was trying to find like what was for me, or everything just seemed temporary. So I would just do one thing for a short period of time and then something else or whatever. But everything from, let's see, working at a hotel to car sales to a 911 dispatcher to building guitars for Martin Guitar to a snowboard instructor. I was a missionary. I did that. Um, Lots of sales jobs. Yeah, everything was just, I'm like, oh, oh, that's what this is like. Okay, let me try something else. And then let me try something else until eventually you fast forward and I moved to Nashville, Tennessee in 2004. I went to an audio engineering school there. And while I was going to school there, I started working at a music venue in town. First I volunteered, then they hired me on their coffee bar. And then I ended up like mixing like for their karaoke nights and then like leading that. So that was like my personality was able to come out. They're like, hey, whenever kids aren't singing, can you just sing songs? I was like, sure, yeah. So I just like pick all these different songs and do karaoke. And then so there was a skate park built on there. So all the kids would come over from that. I used to have these lamb chops is what they called them. Like back in the day, I would have it shaved off, but it was like right here. So all the kids called me chops. And then I ended up mixing and they're like medium size. It was called level one, their stage downstairs. And then they had like this huge room and I ended up mixing in there. And then it just became my thing. They're like, hey, like we want you to be our house engineer. And then so I did that for a period of time and had really good success with it. I learned a ton. I would learn more in one night of mixing live sound than I would like in a week at school. So it was just very rapid. And instead of like sitting in class and having lectures and learning about signal flow or compressors or gates or effects or whatever, I would actually be out there and then it's a sink or swim scenario. I'd have to do it or fail. And everybody is depending on it, so lots of pressure. And it was just really fast track. And for some reason, I loved that. I started out in the main room doing monitors and then I became like the front of house guy. And then I got my first tour to go out on tour as a monitor engineer.
With
Back then in 2004 when I was doing this, or 5 or 6, I don't know when it was after I moved there, that very first tour, it was like 700 bucks a week. And at the time I was like, holy crap, 700 bucks a week. I'm like, that's amazing.
yeah,
I get to be on tour. Like, yeah, let's go. Obviously from then to now, I mean, that was a long time ago. So that's like the daily rate now almost.
yeah.
But still, like I got that first tour and then that was it. So the music industry is the single thing that I've done longer and further than anything else that I've ever gone after, like work wise, vocationally. And it was just something that made sense. I never thought I was going to do it. It wasn't even on my radar, like, oh, I want to get involved in production or I want to be a tour manager. I didn't even have any idea about that stuff when I moved to Nashville. I just thought, and actually, I moved to Nashville originally because of a girl I was interested in. She moved down there, and so I told my parents, I was like, "Hey, yeah, I'd love to go to this audio and engineering school down in Nashville. It just makes a lot of sense." Like sold it to them. You know, they had no idea that this girl lived down there, but that was my real reason for going. It didn't work out with us, and that was fine. But like, it obviously was the right thing because it's what I've done for over 20 years. You
Mm,
know, so I may have gone down there for the wrong motive, but it led to the right outcome, you know.
mm.
So
Well,
yeah,
you followed the muse, and although the muse might have changed, you kept following the muse.
hmm
Sounds like it, if that analogy resonates with you.
yeah, the muse definitely changed, but and so did the music.
Mm,
So many different styles and different artists that I've worked with, and over the past. I've been in over 70 countries around the world, and I've been in every state in the U.S. and every major city in the U.S. I've been on like just about every late night show and morning show, like with different artists. And that was either me there as their tour manager or as the front of house engineer, either way.
mm,
But it's been wild. It's and here's the thing. You kind of asked about this, but for me in my life, everything has been very organic. Like the things that actually happen in my life and that tend to go somewhere and become something are the things that just come to me and the things that just like fall into my lap, like right place, right time kind of stuff, whatever. Relationships, networking with no intent, no plan. It just something happens and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll put my focus on that now, or I'll put my time into that, or I'll pursue that. But it comes to me first. It's like, hey, you know, how do you feel about this? Oh, it sounds like a great idea. That's great because I didn't know what I was going to do otherwise. So now I'm just going to do this for 20 years, you know?
organically falling into place, and you just feel the resonance.
Yeah.
Is that pretty much the breadcrumb that we were looking for? That you've just been following resonance?
Yeah. I think, you know, when something feels like what you're supposed to do, and you definitely know when it's not, when it's something that you have zero interest in or no desire to do whatsoever. And it's interesting because there's been no shortage of stuff that I have had individual interest in that I'm like, oh, let me look into this or let me pursue that or something. It just doesn't really seem to gain any traction. But the other stuff that's supposed to, I guess, because it's the stuff that happens and works out, that stuff comes to me and it just runs, you know?
How does being the Renaissance man connect to that framework? It's kind of goes hand in hand almost. It's like if
Mhm.
you were only identified as, well, I'm only do one thing. Not to associate that with a humdrum voice, although it just seemingly happens. But
Right.
uh, yeah, like it almost sounds like it's the same thing, really. Allowing intuition and inspiration to call you forward, it is the Renaissance. I think
Mm.
that's what the Renaissance is about. When I study art history and I look at the anthropology of what was happening in like the Middle Ages, and like shit was bad in Europe, and there needed to be a revolution, psychology, health, people were dying and all these diseases and stuff. But then the emotional and spiritual nexus, there was this intersection where like humanity was just needing some type of a reset and a growth. And you get people like Da Vinci and Raphael and Michelangelo, and they were connected to, I feel like it's a heartbeat of the next cycle, which in this, to get, I guess it's the technical, it's the age of Aquarius has a different feeling to it. The age of Pisces has a different feeling to it. You meet somebody who's I don't know how into astrology you are. Are you in astrology at all?
I know that I'm a Cancer. I've only read it a few times. I haven't really pursued it.
Have we talked at all about our birthdays or your birthday? You were there for my birthday.
I was there for years. Yeah.
When's your birthday?
June 29th.
Wow, June 29th. I think you had mentioned that. Yeah, yeah, because I have a friend who's June 29th. So you're at the beginning of Cancer. You're almost a Gemini.
Okay.
If you did a Vedic astrology, uh, 13 sign, you'd probably actually be a Gemini. They they
Mm,
they tune it back, and the way that they measure the different houses of each sign, constellations. There's 12 houses, so 360 degrees is the circle. Divide that by 12, everybody gets 30 degrees, but that's not actually how the sky is. So Western astrology, it's like every astrological sign is a perfect 30-degree section of the sky. It's not, uh, anatomically correct per se. Like Scorpio is a much thinner sign than, like, I don't know, Cancer, I guess. But
okay.
yeah, it's interesting for me to just to hear the dispositions that contribute to someone's calling and life path. But
Mm,
back to the Renaissance,
mhm.
the Renaissance and the renovation and the revelation and the revolution are all very synonymous for me.
Yeah.
Studying my human earth father in this incarnation led me to studying that same signal in really all throughout humanity. um I was on this essay, just stuck on this essay for a while in my early 20s. What's the difference between dad and Jesus? And I just kept adding to it. And I ended up finding terms that really helped, terminology that I didn't have before, that my mental framework wasn't able to like access and pull from. Because once I learned about the ego, I would just be like, oh, that's the ego, or that's, oh, they're in their ego, or that person has a big ego.
Mm,
Uh, and that felt maybe helpful for a second, but the more and more I got kind of blossomed with clarity as to what was really going on, I was looking at how this human that you know now as Ted, um, it's just not normal, dude. It's not normal for a human being to follow that breadcrumb trail of true inspiration. And then
mhm.
it's also super rare for, once you follow that breadcrumb trail, for it to work out so well, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Um, at a certain point, I think that character could also become the vagabond, because maybe all they do is follow the inspiration that causes them to, up and go. But I
Yeah,
think there's
like,
some,
don't put all your eggs in one basket, like that kind
yes,
of tension there. It's like, hey, be careful. Like if this is all you do, like if your greatest thing is, you're a surgeon and then, you lose a hand, it's like, what are you gonna do?
reinvent, renaissance. You need some type of
Exactly.
a other thing. So
Yep.
the soul who lives there already, I feel like, it's like they get a connection to why they're alive from God, and they follow that. And if you call it inspiration and it's just about the art, or maybe it's not art, maybe it is a surgeon, and you just know that's what you're supposed to be doing, but you follow that, and you follow that inspiration, and intuition led you there, and you listen to the resonance, and you listen to the harmony. It's got a different texture, it's got a different tone to it than someone who's forcing things in life. And I
Yeah.
think that is the spiritual renaissance of listening to guidance from the quantum field, from life itself. It's a reverberation communication, it's a conversation. How are my choices working out? How'd that investment of time serve me, serve my bank account, serve my family? Do I feel more fulfilled from it? I don't know. I just spent 10 days at that job. I hate it. I thought I wasn't going to like it. It turns out I'm right. I don't like it.
Right.
Do you keep driving through? Is there going to be some threshold that you break through on the other side?
Yeah,
It's
it's interesting because, you can look at that and say, like, oh, well, I just know because I have a peace about something, right? Well, and you can have a peace about something even if like the world is quote unquote burning around you, and that's like this internal, bearing that you maintain, right? But also, I'm thinking like about how the greatest lessons come from our greatest failures, our biggest problems in life. So it's there is a balance between that. Like, so if we're looking at the things that we're pursuing and the things that are capturing us, etc., and we're trying to weigh some level of judgment internally with that to see, is this the thing for me right now?
mm,
Is this something that I should give my energy to or my focus to? Maybe you do like how it feels, maybe you don't like how it feels, but it's interesting because sometimes you have to like walk through fire, you have to walk through the darkness, you have to go through those heavy times. And if you just use that as your barometer, like, hey, how does it make me feel? Well, this feels easy, so that must be my peace. Well, that may be incorrect.
mm.
you may have to experience a thing like, well, this feels awful. This feels like all kinds of turmoil. I feel like my life is being ripped in half. Like it is, but just, stick it out in this moment. And like, that's the thing. It's not an absolute, but stick it out, because on the other side, when you're put back together, just like the broken bone that grows back stronger, the same thing is going to happen to you, if you're willing to. I read this book that's called "If God Loves Us, Why Do We Have Problems?" And that the underlying theme in the book is that you can let your problems get the very best of you, or you can choose to get the best from your problems, right? And it's a total perspective shift. And when you have that, and you realize, okay, the people that understand that and that walk through life that way, it's almost like you have this like type of like this level of like being bulletproof, right? Because stuff is going to happen, but you're no longer washed away with it. You're like, okay, anytime this big setback comes, it's going to set me up for something that's going to be better. And if at the very least, if there's nothing that's tangible from it, it's going to be your character. It's going to be you as a person. And that could be something that plays out way down the road with something that you're not even aware of yet, right? But character development, I feel like that's key to anything that we do. And just being the best version of yourself, and being somebody that's battle tested, that's, gotten through absolute hell and gotten to the other side. They are going to go through whatever it is they're doing, if it's relationship, if it's job, if it's whatever, they're going to go through that far, far different than anyone else. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel like this connects to a topic I wanted to bring up, which is like, what is your lens on greatness? Because whether it's an artist, which I think you also have a very unique lens on what is it to be a great artist,
Mhm.
and what makes an artist great.
Yeah.
I don't no, don't have to spoil your incredible connections that I know you've been around some epic artists, but what do you feel like that is in your insight?
I think that, to answer it absolute in the literal sense, what makes an artist great is somebody that creates purely for the sake of creating and nothing else. 100%. So no agenda, no feedback necessary, no public approval, etc. Just
Pure.
creating something that you could potentially say, I'm going to make something today, or I'm going to spend the next year making something that I'm fairly certain that nobody will ever even see, ever. But I believe in it, and I'm committed to it. And it's part of getting back to it. It's part of my own development as a person, let alone as an artist, taking your skill to another level. When you're creative, you have to create. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's something that's inside of you that if you don't continue to allow that to happen in whatever form that it needs to, or that it does, you're going to be stifled. You're going to be unhealthy. You're going to be upset. It's going to spill over into all different areas of your life. So you have to do it just for the sake of doing it. And then if there's some peripheral bonus that takes place, in the worldly sense of like financial success, notoriety, et cetera, then so be it. That happens. That's cool. That's fine. But the my issue is that I feel like that's typically the driving force behind most
Yeah,
art these days. It's like, well, it's my vocation. I've got to do this to make a living. It's like, oh, well, that means
commerce.
the art has suffered, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
no
It's not
longer.
art as much. It's not art as much as it is a commerce
Now it's a
exchange.
product. Yeah.
Yeah, it's craft. It might be craft more than it is an actual artistic process.
Hmm.
Who's someone, and I've kind of already asked you this question on tour, but who is someone who's wowed you with their artistic process that really impacted you, and you left that interaction or being around them and was like, whoa, art, creativity, purity.
Yeah. Uh, I think I might have mentioned this, that, I've been really fortunate and blessed to work with really well known, successful artists and different understandings of that term, right? But uh, one of the artists that I worked with that I was immediately, uh, what's the right way to say this?
Blown away.
Well, it was just that it gave me pause, right? Instead of just me in my capacity. So there I was working as a tour manager with this artist, and instead of me just doing the job, delivering to the highest level that I can do that for them, keep, in order to leave a good, a good taste in their mouth. They're satisfied. I hired this person. They did a great job. Would love to work with them again in the future, et cetera. Just forget all about all that. Like, it's so easy when I'm on the job to just be, super hyper focused, blinders on. I'm just doing what I'm here to do so that you're satisfied and I'm satisfied internally with the measure that I've presented myself, right? It's easy to do that. And I remember I was doing my job, and then I had a conversation with her, and she was talking about something with set design and with color choice. And for some reason, right in that moment when she started having this conversation with me, I was immediately aware of how unique her perspective was, and the types of questions that she was asking, and the things that were most important to her compared to other people in that same situation that could have cared less about these certain items. And her name was Sia. And so I was working with Sia during the when Chandelier had come out, and it was, charting everywhere. And I was just really, really surprised because I feel like all of the other musician artists that I had worked with were, obviously highly skilled at what they do, and but also they're very business minded all the time. Not to say that they're not like fun, great people to be around, etc. But with her, it was the first time I ever thought to myself, wow, she is a real artist. She's actually an artist first, and there's the business, as a peripheral thing. So yeah, to answer your question, it was definitely Sia that I was most surprised with. And I mean, I guess if you're familiar with her work and you've seen what she's done, then it's probably not shocking to see that. But a lot of people, you never know unless you've worked with them. Like, okay, how much of this is a persona? How much of this is just inherent to who they are? Or how much of this is like, okay, part business manager, part musician, part like all the different people getting their ingredients in to create a product, right?
Right.
But then when I was working with her, it was just very apparent, like, oh, she's just a creator. That's what she does. And then she just happens to have work from this at a really high level right now, right?
Right. It makes me think of the difference between discovery and presentation. Because discovery is like it's between you and you. It's between you and the inner cave. It's between you and God. It's a where did art come from? Like, how does a good artist find art, or find inspiration, or find creativity? Where do they go within themselves? Or, where did Jimi Hendrix go when he closed his eyes?
Mm,
If you hear, and again, I think, rather anomalaic, or there's other people out there that have it, you obviously, but it's a rare thing to be next to an artist for an exposed amount of time and see this process that really defies logic. It defies, like, I think it's a positive trauma because it disconnects you from this thinking that I think the world tries to tell us, which is just be normal,
mm,
just try to fit in the box. And then you see an artist, again, someone who has had this blessed moment of opportunity to be successful in it. I think, especially, you see all the moments where they just turned the car when there was no need to, but
hmm
did it then. And it's like, if you could go back into that moment and just press pause and do one of those like things where you like in the Matrix, they freeze the moment and then like the camera starts moving around. It's like if you could go back into that moment and just like 360 this person's consciousness and be like, what
right.
led to that choice?
What
Because
was everything else around them that was happening in that moment that just like all connected the dots for that one event?
and I love feeling how I see spirituality in it as no one else would have made that choice.
Hmm.
And you met him, I think, briefly, but my mentor, Steve Smith, works with Kanye very closely. And I mean, it's like, I met Ye one time and it's already been, which is one of the craziest blessings. But
Mm,
just talking to Steve and hearing these backstories, one, it's like weirdly sounds familiar. It sounds like my father. But
mm,
two, it's phenomenally fascinating to hear those quick little anecdotal stories that maybe it's for him, it's like an off the cuff thing that happened. But then for me, as like a art nerd, I hear the psychology and the anti-establishmentism and the renegadism and the Renaissance manism that
mm.
is the foundation of this person's identity, that in a moment they made that choice and it was just the flick of the wrist for them.
Yeah.
But for a normal human being who's living a life, it's an alien language. It's an inaccessible place. And I feel like somehow there's this connection to living there more often, leading to a more fulfilling life and
Mm,
surprising yourself. It's like that space is the place where if you are eating the breadcrumbs from that place, it is this uh non sequitur. I don't think that's the term. Non sequitur or non sec. What's the term? Like a this is a non sequitur. It's like where it doesn't connect. Um,
consequential?
no. It's very consequential, but it's like what's that term? Non
No,
sec.
sequential, not consequential, but I don't know.
Non sequitur definition. Sequitur, a conclusion or statement that does not logically follow from the previous argument or
Mm,
statement. So it's like rationally, you just can't come to the conclusion as to how is that the response. But
mm,
then if you totally disassemble your process of needing it to be logical, like a baby, just playing with a baby, like or a kid, I think hanging out with children tunes us as humans into this space more often where it's like the floor is made out of lava, quick jump on the couch. It's like logically that doesn't make sense. It's like shut up, you're ruining the moment. The floor is lava. You
yeah.
have, and it inspires and it brightens. The beginning of this anecdote was the difference between discovery and presentation. I feel like is a very rare thing when an artist can have that simultaneity between those two domains. And I wonder if you ever noticed that with Sia, um, very different presentation than someone like Ted Nugent. Um, and I can imagine a very different discovery process. But I've heard, and I know you've heard Dad speak about, his mentor Fred Bear passed, and he's just doing chores, and he just picked up that guitar and dun, 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 and he's crying, and just like the words came, boom, and other moments where he had a fun evening with certain individuals, and then the this guitar solo came.
Yeah.
But the discovery process, I also think of like Jim Morrison starting off his career by like looking back and not looking at the crowd.
Mm.
So
Like
there's
Sia,
not necessarily, huh?
Sia did that as well. Remember, she just would have her back to the audience.
Mm. So I'm curious your lens on that because um someone being successful, I feel like there's a left brain, right brain balance that needs some level of happening.
Mhm.
Needs a bit of correlation and balance. Someone can discover great art and be the virtuoso, but that doesn't mean they're going to be able to present it well. That doesn't mean they know how to do their makeup and also that they're even likable. So
Mhm.
what have you found or discovered about, because you could be a great tour manager but you could be like I don't give a fuck about people and hate
Right, a
people, but
horrible
you know how to do
person.
your yeah. So talk about that bridge there, because it's like the introspective
Mhm.
to the interpersonal kind of space that all of this seems to connect with as well.
Well, let me see if I can touch on all those different points. So one thing when you're talking about like the what did you say, discovery versus presentation, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think about that like childlike curiosity and innocence. And as a father of a 5.5-year-old, I see it all the time and I love it. I love watching the way that his mind works, specifically because of that very concept. Because I'll look at him and I'm thinking, okay, he is connecting these things and his mind, his path of imagination right now is pure, is totally pure, right? There's no years of institutionalized learning. There's no, a lifetime of different types of employment or managers that he's worked underneath. Like there's nothing that is shaping him in the way that he's acting or the thoughts that he's having aside from just organically what is just being experienced in that moment. I love just looking at it and seeing it and just being like, because it's just real. It's just, there's nothing that's forced about it. There's nothing that's pre-planned. It's just like wind,
Sure,
basically.
sure.
So yeah, so I think, yeah, certain artists operate that way and they're able to really just be completely detached from everything else that's happening and then just be singularly focused in whatever that thing is. And there's any number of factors that lead you to that, but it's not everybody has that, but I feel like when the best art is created, that's what happens. There's that that inspiration that comes to them just seemingly out of nowhere. You could say it came from God, you could say it came from whatever, but it comes and it just suddenly like, I have to go. It's like I have to get up and do this right now. It's like somebody just pressed this button that was wired into this artist to do this thing for their entire life, and it was just activated. It's like now they create it, and here it is, and now it exists in the world. Long after they're gone. Um, yeah.
But it doesn't always mean they'll know how to present it.
Oh no, no. I
Especially,
mean,
especially with the kids. You watch a kid and they might find it like, look what I drew, and you're looking at it and I mean, okay, I think, is that a horse? No, it's a dog. Oh, right, right, right. It's a dog. But their discovery is the purest.
yeah.
Then you
Like
go,
my son, like if there was a period of time when he was really like serious about painting, and I tried to really encourage that. And every time he would paint something, I mean, like for him, like, hey, what is this? He's like, oh, it's a monster truck. I'm like, okay. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, this thing looks incredible. I mean, there's abstract art on display at the Ringling Art Museum right now that is it's exactly the same. Like I actually at one point had like a side by side photo like that I shared on Instagram, and like he's never seen it before, but it looks exactly the same. It's the same caliber of because it has that pure expression and what he did that on this blank canvas that didn't exist and now it existed, and the way that he just in that moment he was just completely focused on that and creating. I'm like, man, this is just as impressive as that is. And he's my son. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just expressing himself. And it was just, it's awesome. But you asked about tour managing and about like what did you how did you phrase it, like as far as a balance and like being good at your job but
well,
off.
I was just looking at that. I mean, I don't have any plaque that says good at asking questions per se, but I was just noticing this topic coming up while we were talking of like there's a different skill per se of this internal discovery, and then once you've discovered something, presenting it. It's like a different moment in the discovery, which I know you as an artist, you've been on the front. You as a production member, you've been on the back end and you've seen the craft, which is like these are songs that have been written for years. Nothing's new here. Like hit these notes. This is presentation. These are entertainers. Yeah, there was art that happened. This ain't that. There's artistic things that happen for sure on night of, yes, but these moments are largely pre-planned. We're hitting these notes. These are the cues. Better happen at 7:15, etc., etc.
Yeah.
It's presentation, and yeah, I don't know where I was going with it, but just seeing that as like a theme of kind of what we're talking about right now, of like, yeah, left brain, right brain, logic, creativity, the purity, but then also on some level rigidity. Yeah, being a Renaissance person, and then having those boundaries come up where you're like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that anymore,
Yeah.
and or yeah, whatever the format that it takes. But just look, I was just looking at that kind of, it looked like a fence
Hmm.
There's like on one side of the fence, there's discovery, and then the other side of the fence, there's the presentation of what was discovered. And I feel like someone like Sia, you must have seen, you had an incredible front row seat to an enigma and an artist that had an incredibly unique way of presenting. And it happened to be that she also had an incredible way of discovery as well. And knowing a little bit about her career, she was writing and discovering for other people for a long time.
Hmm.
And then it sounds like, in the same way that a song is discovered, she discovered a way that she wanted to present her identity.
Yeah,
And,
she literally said, because she was doing songwriting for years, and
and
all
killing
like
it.
the pop stars were hitting it, like Britney, Rihanna. But anyways, like when she wrote Chandelier, that was another one of the songs that she was gonna just pitch. That at least that was her thinking as she began it. But as she was in the middle of it and she's creating this thing, she's like, "Oh my gosh, I just wrote the perfect pop song, and I want it for me."
Hmm.
And then so here she comes. She had a previous touring career, and then she's like, I'm going to perform this song. And she hadn't put out anything on her own in years. And so she comes out with this, and it was, a tsunami. It was massive. Absolutely
But
huge.
she had never done this like character thing before.
Yeah. So in the past, when she toured, she was, just typical front person staring at the audience. Here I am. She had had issues and back then after she had had success with substance abuse, and so she had gotten clean from that. And part of that, she was in her process of trying to understand it and circumvent it in the future. She thought that it was possibly linked with the success and all of just people like in her face all the time, etc. So she's like, well, maybe if I just make it about the music and not about me, so like I'll literally like just turn my back on it and perform these songs, and that should be able to allow me to like have that separation between that anxiety that I had from I had this persona, this public image, right? And so that was what she did. And the funny thing was, is she told me once in the dressing room, she's like, yeah, I really wish that I hadn't done that because I'm such a people person. She's like, now I'm stuck.
Wow.
Very cool.
Wow. Yeah. Not that there's like a point to get to, but I'm fascinated by that because to me it's like stage production and production design is something I love to think about, and also the like psychosomatic layers that go behind production design. I
Mhm.
look at my dad's like earliest documented performances,
Yeah.
and in Amboy Duke's guitar's up here.
Oh
Like
yeah.
his strap is tight and he's like
Yep.
this,
Very
and
well
he's,
dressed. Yep.
yeah, clean, and little facial hair, but had the hair
Yep.
and just in it, and could
Professional,
still see,
presentable.
you could see that essence climbing out of him, but it was all still like,
Yeah.
it was still contained to a large degree.
Yeah. Hadn't been set free or released yet.
Yep. And then I love looking at the interviews, and I've never really dove into that with him. I think that'd be a fascinating conversation with him, is like, because you go from that
Hmm.
to, I think a couple of years later, he starts swinging out on a rope,
Hmm.
and then, then it all went where it went.
Riding out on a live white buffalo on stage to start your set. Like, yeah, it was quite the journey.
Quite the journey indeed. In I guess starting to wind down, what was something that you took away from this summer's tour that you're uh more full because of? Something that you walked away from, I guess, yeah, in general.
Well, so touring has been part of my life for over 20 years. And of course, the world is very aware of COVID when that took place, and it shut down the entertainment industry first and foremost before anything else.
Mhm.
So it took a while for that to come back. But even prior to that, I had really walked away from touring. I started a family. Of course, I mentioned I have a son. I had taken a job here locally. I was working at a mega church as their technical director. So, I was still using my skill set, but it was just very like on a small stage, comparatively. But anyways, so when when I went out with Ted first, I had this was oh sorry. This was right at the end, COVID had ended and stuff was just starting to come back online again, right? And then so tours were just starting to happen again. And at the time, I had just started doing things in my field again. Like there was a period of time during COVID when there was nothing, literally nothing that I could do like within my field. I would have to just go find a job somewhere and do something, right? Like I had a boat that was paid off, a great boat that I sold that. And so I lived off that for a while, whatever. And then I had a friend of mine who has a marine construction business that I went and worked with him for a while, building boat lifts, seawalls, docks, etc. Like super hard physical labor stuff. At the
Wow.
same time, it was on the water, and so I did that and I was grateful to have it, but it was literally backbreaking kind of stuff. But it was cool because it was really, really hard work. And I like a good project. I like working with my hands as well. And so I took a lot away from that. Now I was working for that company. It was Green Marine, and then I started getting some phone calls to go work at this production company in Tampa called ESI. So I'm like, oh, okay, shows are coming back online. So I started doing stuff with them. There's this church in Largo that started contracting me to come mix services for them as well. And so I'm like, oh, there's all these little things happening. So I was able to leave that marine construction, thankfully, and save my life basically. So I don't die over there. But I was doing that. And it was in the midst of doing that as stuff had just started happening that I got the phone call last year to go out with Ted.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, this is great. Like I'm not trying to tour like I used to back in the day when I was gone the majority of the year and home like 2 months. I'm not trying to do that anymore. But this came along. It was just a few weeks. I was like, great. I don't know. It's Ted Nugent. I had actually just listened to his podcast on Joe Rogan just a few weeks before that. It was very recent. So it was really interesting. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, that's wild. It's some synchronicity or something. And so I did that. And then here we are. So that I just wanted to have a little backstory to bring us up
Yeah.
to, you on this tour this year. What did you take away from it? There's a couple of answers there for that. There's me, like, what did I take away as a man, as a person that I will always carry with me, from doing that, and then what was like just the immediate, like, visceral experience of being there on that tour, right? It was unique because it was Ted's farewell tour. It's his final tour, Adios Mofos. And so that was incentive it in itself to do it, because of course it was a choice, it was an option. They reached out to me with the offer like, hey, we would love to have you if you're available and interested in doing this. By the way, it's Ted's final tour. It's like, oh well, I mean, how can I say no to that? How can I, why not be the person that does his last tour? So I'll close it out and do it from the start to the finish and just crush it. So that was the reason for going. So doing the tour, working with Ted, I remember the very first time, the first tour I worked with him, what it felt like. So we fly private, Ted, myself, and then, it could be family or friends or whoever else that may join us occasionally as well. But it's always Ted and myself flying in and out for every city, for every show. And it always felt like to me, like the way that Ted carries himself and just how driven and how assertive he is and just commanding. I'm like, this has got to be similar to like flying like with one of the generals in Afghanistan. Like so I feel like if you have no idea what it's like, you think about that, and that's probably a pretty fair comparison. So whatever you would experience doing that level, that type of person, that's pretty similar to operating like with Ted every day.
Yeah.
That's what he expects. His mindset is absolutely there, and he looks at the tour as like, these are all my soldiers. Let's go, right?
Yeah.
So there's that aspect. That's the visceral thing. And Ted expects the very best at all times, and he expects everybody to put everything that they have into it. It's like a razor's edge level of satisfaction. It's like everything's perfect, but
Yeah.
everything just burned down. So that's, I feel like that's a good thing to go through and to experience. I mean, I was definitely uniquely suited for that with some of my previous experience in life. to be able to have the fortitude to go through that. But whatever happens, whenever you go through something that's a challenge, that's a struggle, inevitably, what does it do afterwards? Well, it makes you appreciate that much more
Mhm.
when things are, going well, things are easy, right? It's like whenever you're sick, you're like, oh my gosh, I need to really remember the next time I feel better to like really appreciate that, right? Because I feel awful right now. So it's kind of a similar thing. Like you have this tension, like where you're operating, you're doing it, and it's like you're juggling all these things. It's like hold your breath, Okay, good. Another day's down, and it was perfect. It was great. Let's do it exactly the same way tomorrow, just as good. You just keep going. Finally, it's done. You're like, okay. You go home, back to your normal life again, and you're like, oh man, like, what was that? Like, what was I just doing? And yeah, so I
Very good description.
yeah, thanks. There's the attention to detail that's obviously inherent as a tour manager in that position, but everybody's different. Every artist is different, like we talked about, down to personality. Some people can be like, hey, as long as the building isn't burned down, it's a good show, And then people have different levels of satisfaction and expectation. Ted's is the highest, really, of anyone I've ever worked with, and the most uncompromising, like, hey, it's this way or no way. And that's great. Like, that's good for you in your craft to go through that. It's like, a different type of training, a different higher, like a higher level of competency that you walk away with because of having to do it this good every single time, right? It just makes you better.
Yeah.
For anyone else that you work with, but then even just in life in general, you bring pieces of that. You carry it forever. If you've done one thing in your life one time and you've done it really well, that's always going to show up in other ways in your life. But of course, yeah, I definitely appreciate my time being home and having like this home life again. And as you had just kind of touched on ever so briefly, like I'm doing all kinds of work here on my property. So this is a home that's like 100 years old that I bought a little over a year ago, and it's got this incredible 100-year-old landscaping on it. And so I've been like slowly restoring the beauty of this home and of the property, and with the hopes and the intents to one day in the near future use outdoor as a wedding venue. So this is my home that I love, it's my retreat, but it has so much potential to do something like that. So that has been something that I've super, super engaged myself with.
Mm.
And that's another one of this, like, Renaissance man, like multifaceted, jack of all trades thing. Like, as you saw yesterday, I took this door down off the hinges that goes outside of my master bedroom to the balcony, sanded it all down, stained it, made it two-tone instead of just the solid color that it was. It's got all these dark rectangles in it. It just looks amazing. It's beautiful, but just stuff like that. That was a full day project. And went out and bought a belt sander and just now, so it looks like, oh, is that what you do for a living? Like you're like restoration or like you're a carpenter or something. It's like, well, no, but it's like, why can't I do it myself? And
Right.
that's really like the attitude that I take with everything. It's like, unless something is like super high level, like way outside of my wheelhouse, then I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to just figure it out because there's no reason I can't. And so that's just what I always do here. I'm always doing landscaping or renovating or something. But yeah, but it's so wild to think about the shift. It's like, oh, am I the same guy that was just out tour managing for Ted Nugent, and then now here I am, taking care of my chickens and transplanting these palm trees. And it's like, and moving these pavers, like it's just so wide, like the gamut of endeavors and projects that I take on. And then here I am talking to you from my studio where I love to record music and write music. And it's just there I don't know, multifaceted, many sides. I feel like life is way more interesting that way.
Mhm.
Like, I have my old motorcycle outside that I taught myself how to bring back to life and did all the mechanical work on it and customize it. I'm just always taking on these different things. And part of it is out of, interest. Part of it is, well, I don't want to just sit around and do nothing. I don't want to be bored. So like, what's going to like captivate me? But then another part is just, it's all part of that personal development. And I feel like it leads to me becoming more well-rounded and a better man, a better father. If I'm in a relationship with somebody, I'm going to be that much better for them. And whatever job I'm doing, I'm now like, I bring all of this other capability into it. Even if I'm just here to do X, like I can do all of this stuff from A to Z as well. And then, so that actually brings me back to that point that you asked. You could be a great tour manager specifically, but you could just suck with people. You could be a terrible people person. I mean, to be honest, if that was the case, then you wouldn't last very long, right?
Right.
But yeah, when you have all these other skills and all these other endeavors in life that you've taken on and that you've experienced, well, that makes you much more like a Swiss Army knife, like a multi-tool or something. So when you're in a position that may on the outside seem very one-dimensional, you make it very three-dimensional. You know, the way that you show up and what you bring to the table that's going to be different than anyone else that's doing that job. And so I think that that's probably the answer there, is that by doing all these things, it's not like I ever had this master plan at the start to like, well, I need to make sure I can do everything really good so that whatever that one thing is, I do it the best. Like, I never thought that, but that's what happens, you know, by having all these different skill sets, because you can just draw on any one of them whenever you need it.
If you had to describe the one thing that you are doing that is interwoven with all these other things that might be individual activities, what is the thing that you do that is what you're always doing, no matter what it is that you are doing?
Hmm, that's a great question.
I you could ask me, you could ask it to me. I actually have a response. I was
Tell me.
talking about it yesterday.
Hear it.
What you have to actually ask it.
Okay. So I want to hear from you though. Tell me what's the one thing, like out of all the stuff that you do, what's like your 10, the thing that you just are excelled at. And when you step into that, there's no, you know, it doesn't like anyone on the outside, they don't see any effort. It's just, man, this is so easy for you. You just make it look so easy. Like, what's that thing for you?
Well, how you asked it is now changed slightly since what I was going to say, but I would say listening and reflecting.
Hmm.
I feel like in all the different things I've got certified and trained in, I I can trace it back to, I had a mentor one time say, if you ever get foggy on who you are now and who you're being, see if you can trace connective threads to who you've always been, even if you can like remember doing that same thing in childhood.
Hmm.
And I remember being on the playground, dude, and like I hated arguing.
Hmm.
Wait. Hold on a second. Hold on. What were you trying to say? I remember doing that multiple times. And I went to a different school every year up until eighth grade. I've been to 8 different schools up until eighth grade. And I remember being at home and I remember, I hated when my mom and dad would argue. And I remember that was when I yelled. And I didn't want to yell, but I felt like I had this ability to be really, and I saw my dad dragon fire sometimes, and I didn't want to do that. So I think it made me a little bit meek sometimes because I didn't want to abuse whatever this
You're
thing is.
avoiding it.
But then if somebody was like, yo, and I would fury up because I saw the importance of like, yo, hold on, you're not letting them respond, bro. How are you? You're gonna confirm your point that they don't hear you. Well, you don't let them respond. Hold on a second. So I started doing that to family, I started doing that to friends, and all of a sudden I just got called into all these moments where for some reason Rocco could hear what was happening and reflect back to the situation. I think this is also an or not an anecdote, but a asterisk. This is an asterisk to the answer
Mm-hmm.
is I love mirroring what is most needed.
Mm.
And I think the only way I do that is this is my original answer. This is
Yeah.
my preloaded answer. The only thing I do is I listen to God's word.
Mm.
And as poetic as that might sound, I could break that down to a biological, biochemical process. And it's my job to.
Yeah.
I got, the yoga certification, the trauma therapy certification, and I'm technically a minister. And I love to break down how, by listening to our internal alignment,
Mm.
we honor that which we come from's wish for us
Mm.
without, being super secular about it. We honor God's wish for us. We honor God's will by honoring our internal alignment. And when we honor that, we are living in God's word, because to stray from it is to stray from that alignment. And then to just reduce the gap between what we say and think and do
Yeah.
and what God wants us to say, think, and do. I love to just sew that together, which I actually sew things now as well. And I think that's another, I make clothing, I make music, I make film, I make story.
Yeah.
Um, I just had a session with somebody and they said, wow, I think you should focus more on that app. I was like, dang, I forgot about that app I was working on. Don't tell me more things. But all of these different mediums, to me, they contain the same practice.
Yeah.
So, I'm having a conversation with my bro Brent, and I'm writing down sticky notes, and I'm doing the same thing that I'm doing when I'm working. It's
Yeah.
the same thing I'm doing when I'm sewing. I'm
Yeah.
I'm focused on the thing, but whoa, that is a good idea. Hold on a second. Let's follow this for a second. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, can we come back to the original thought? Okay, got it. Now we're back, but I'm glad that we did go there. So I listen and then mirror and stabilize. Period. Listen, mirror, and stabilize, I think, is the action, the activity that I'm doing throughout all the different activities that I'm doing.
Mirroring is such a huge skill. And that's, I think most people learn about mirroring when it comes to something like sales and you're
Mm.
trying to mirror the energy or yeah, really the energy of the person that you're speaking with. So if this person is all high energy, then you are too. And if they're really chill, then you're chill too. And it just creates this immediate sense of comfort and it puts them at ease, right? Um, but yeah, just in life in general, mirroring somebody's energy and it's like it's that's like the Jedi mind trick kind of stuff. Like when you're able to do that, then like before you know, you're like, man, like I feel like I can tell you anything. Like you're a great listener because they suddenly are starting to see themselves in you because you're showing them like what you're perceiving. Okay, you're like this. Okay, well I mean I have my mind, but I'm gonna kind of set myself like this. So because I can tell that's where you're operating right now, you know? That's a really kind of elevated mindset thing.
I didn't have uh like medical framework for it until I was 28, 29, when I started going through this training for somatic release therapy, which is a type of trauma therapy, and working with the vagus nerve. And I learned about this polyvagal theory and the work of this dude named Stephen Porges and Peter Levine. And basically, the blood flow health of the vagus nerve determines psychological states, neurochemical release, and biochemical stability, and how well someone feels and how socially safe someone feels,
Mm.
which largely determines what they're going to share and what version of themselves they show up as. So you're mainly getting trained as how to mirror.
And you
And
probably notice that the most like with people frequently over the course of your life since you've been operating this way, saying something like, "Man, I don't know why I'm telling you this. Like, I
yeah,
can't believe I'm sharing this with you right now. You know, I don't normally talk about this, something like that, because you've just created this really safe feeling, and it just kind of naturally comes out of them. This thing that's typically behind some sort of barrier, right?
right,
And you're
right.
just like, hey, it's safe here. It's fine.
Giving permission.
They're like, yeah, it's disarming. Yeah.
Which for me leads to the word dharma, which I did not know about until I was 27 and got into yoga. But dharma is basically like the implicit utility design purpose of your mechanism, your system, your human, your soul specifically. It has a purpose.
Mhm.
And I had those moments actually growing up. I remember there was this girl that I like knew in math class in high school at Waco High. I won't say her name, but like she was like a friend, and I didn't have a thing for her. It was like a genuine like homie, platonic homie, and I knew her boyfriend.
Yeah.
And one day she was just like, I don't know why I feel. Is it okay if I just share some things with you? I don't have anybody else to talk to.
Mm.
And that phrase, "I don't know why I'm called to share this with you," would come out. I heard that prior, but then
Yeah.
I got this certification, or really just education, which I think gave me mm, technical field support for something that maybe I already had a bit of an inclination towards being good at, or I have a disposition that makes me skilled at that. So then those two things merged, that's how I know it's Dharma. That's how
Mm.
I know it's God's word, because I feel really good and I can feel that this person is feeling really good. So it's like, whoa, me doing a selfish, it's like my most selfish activity leads paradoxically to selfless service. And
Yeah.
it's this full circle kind of like recycling of energy and time. And yeah, it's a signpost of when it's Dharma, is when you have had that phrase come to you before, and then also you get then the education that supports it, and it's like, whoa, okay, I might be designed for this.
Yeah.
So what is the thing, before we leave it too far, what is the thing that you are doing amongst all the things that you do?
What's the thing that I'm doing amongst all the things that I do? Well, I think in a word, it's creating.
Mhm.
I think that's the driving idea behind so much of my day to day and just life in general. And to me, that takes shape in all kinds of ways, many that are outside of the few that would immediately come to mind. But yeah, it's
It's a
there's
fun thing
all.
to it's a fun thing to contemplate, huh?
Mhm. Yeah, there's always the need in me, the driving force for me to just make something or to change something, just to do something. And it's not a busyness. It's like it's an idea. It's something that isn't here right now, right? In the moment. It's something that is in a different state right now, and I'm going to change it. Um, that's in me every single day. And if I don't create, then I quote unquote go crazy.
Mm.
I just I become not a nice balanced representation of myself. It just kind of, maybe like I'm dragging a little bit, maybe I'm a little bit more irritable. Like there's just different ways that it shows up if I were to not be engaging typically and consistently like I do. I'm like I've learned this about myself.
I hear you saying that you love to feel utilized.
Yeah, and even, it's just, and this is kind of what we spoke about earlier, is that it's even if nobody is aware of it, it's just I know it. Like I was thinking about this yesterday. I've only recently, like, I've never really done it, but I only just 2 days ago, I'm like, I'm going to start journaling, and I found an app that I'm using, and I'll just do speech to text on it. And
Nice.
afterwards, I'm like, man, I feel great. I feel great.
Yeah.
Like it's like sitting like with a counselor and just unloading my entire thought pattern, and then I'm like, okay, let's go. But one thing I was looking into, it's like, okay, why do I feel the need to do these projects? Why, And so I tried to like really break that down. And I'm like, do I feel like if I'm not working, like, on the clock, so to speak, somewhere, that I have to do this, or otherwise I'm a bum? Like,
Mm.
what is it? Like just really trying to ask myself and find a reason. Do I do this because I want to stay active? Do I do it because I feel like it's expected? Do I, like I'm just really, I think that that's an important place to be at. Like for whatever it is that's a regular occurrence in your life. Like it's something that I've read about, and recently it's like you need to like really like sit on it, and find out, especially if it's something that's a problem, something that you don't like to think about, something that you don't want to deal with. Like what's that thing that you keep putting off, right?
Mm.
Then no, just force yourself to just stare at it, whatever it is, internally, etc., and just finally find out why. Be like, oh, That's it. And then it's just it's an unlocking, like now more of that personal development and more of that freedom, self-discovery, different way of living. I don't know, escaping from the norm and from society's structure. One thing that I've read, I'm sure you've read Ecclesiastes before, and when you think of Ecclesiastes, you think, oh, meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless, right? There's nothing new under the sun, nothing that can be done that hasn't been done, etc. And if you're in the wrong mindset, you can read that and be like, okay, well, forget it. Like there's no purpose in life. It's over, and why even get off the couch, right? But I think if you're in the right mindset and you read that, then like here's this thought that I've had recently from that, and I wanted to share it with you and see what you think.
Mm.
Is that when you realize that everything is basically meaningless in life, is it then on us to decide what we give meaning to?
Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder is a famous phrase, I think, for a reason hyper connected to one of the more famous scientific discoveries of all times by Albert Einstein, named the theory of relativity, which is largely based on the law of subjectivity, you know. And this also connects to a recent dive in I've been really enjoying with Stoicism,
Mm,
specifically Marcus Aurelius's Meditations,
yeah.
and I think it's opposing vantage point called nihilism.
Yep.
Um, and it sounds like that's a bit of what you're talking about with Ecclesiastes, negative lens,
Mm,
potentially lending a contributing, nihilistic, idea towards that. Nothing, there's no point.
mm,
Um, there is a definite subjectivity that can be revealed in this world, in this realm, in this life by just saying like, man, it's hot. And you're standing next to a person who's like, I'm literally looking for a sweatshirt. I'm cold. So it's a lie to claim something subjective is an objective truth. However, there's these profound moments, in life where uh it don't matter who you are, it is what it is. I like that phrase. That's been like a main phrase of maybe the past couple of years. Like, it is what it is. And this is also connecting to my lineage that I really found, I'd say, deeper harmonic, philosophical, spiritual resonance with than any other lineage I've ever found. And for clarification, I am Yeshua's brother. I am a son of Christ. I am a brother in Christ. I am a Christ follower. But my disenfranchisement with the Christian modern religious landscape, I think, was a gift, and actually Yeshua, Jesus Christ, gift to me to find him outside of the traditional settings of Christianity and my family cultural framework, which
mhm,
then I find yoga, and yoga leads me to Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga leads me to Siddha. And Siddha is like, back in the Himalayas thousands of years ago, there'd be like the one super sensitive, call it priest of the village or priestess of the village. And, it'd be like, you need to hard boil an egg, uh, sleep on rooster eggs, and wear a gold pendant emerald, and then drink lemon juice on the next full moon and sing this song. Like, they would literally prescribe things like that and free people of disease. And it's actually connected to mineral deposits in the body and elemental dispositions, like someone has too much fire, too much water, etc. And there's this phrase in the Siddha lineage, which is largely just spoken trans, not written lineage much. It's mostly just like, okay, this is what this is called. It's
mm,
happening now. It's like, oh shit.
mm,
Uh, and one of the phrases that I only had a couple people that were Siddha in my life, And the phrase was, if it is, it must be. So then why is it? And if you can understand the why of anything, you can understand God's perfect design. And in that objective reality, there's your subjective access to it.
Mhm.
And if you can understand your subjective purpose to this objective scenario, I think that is where meaning occurs, is the actual angle in which we arrive at a situation that is greater than ourselves. When
Mhm.
we feel our angle, an angle can be acute, an angle can be obtuse, it can be
Yeah.
a right angle, and I think the numbers and numerology gets really interesting there too. Excuse me, like 90 degrees is a right angle, and
Mhm.
yeah, 360, 180, all this stuff that I think also gets into astrology. And if you haven't heard of human design or gene keys, someone with your disposition that's I think hyper mentally agile and yet looking for really practical uh, landscaping, pun intended, you'd really appreciate gene keys and human design.
Mhm.
And it's like, yeah, we can never know someone else's perspective, but through empathy and attempting to understand them, it grows our perspective.
Mhm.
And I think the faculty that we grow in that understanding through is called love. Love is this thing that, you're able to understand your son by looking at his drawing, or I'm able to understand, my dad by seeing him kill the guitar solo, and then his knees are killing him. And he's like, he's killing it on stage and then winces when as he sits down. It's
Yeah.
a profound scenario there is an objective thing happening, and then there's my subjective, and then there's his subjective, then there's your subjective.
Right.
And so, wait, what was the exact? Oh, the meaning. Where does meaning come from? Is that the freaking question?
Well, no, it's just a thought that I've been having, like when, if, everything is meaningless,
What's
then,
the point?
well, yeah, I mean that's the immediate question, right? And it's a great question, and you should answer it. But I think that, and I do believe, like that, like it says in the book of Ecclesiastes, that there's really no purpose to anything that we do in life, really. Like by and large, like put yourself in an airplane and put yourself at 50,000 feet and then look at the people's, little squabbles down on Earth. It's like, pfft, it's insignificant, right?
Yeah,
When you
yeah,
get far enough away, and that's how everything becomes when you're looking through that lens.
right.
So what I've been kind of mulling over recently is, and it's not a desperation, like, oh, life is over, like, the end is nigh thing. It just, it, I think that when you have a healthy mindset and you look at something like this, and you're in the place to be able to, in a healthy way, look at something like this, then maybe, the takeaway is that, okay, everything is meaningless, so choose what the thing is in your life that you want to give meaning to.
That
you know
part.
really make sure that that thing that you give the meaning to is worth it,
Yes.
right? Because I kind of parallel, when I say that in my mind, I think of an extreme analogy, like, if this was my last hour alive, what would I want to do? Like, how would I want to spend that last hour in life? Well, I'd want to have my son with me, right? That's it. That's the thing. So naturally, like, that's what I give the meaning to in my life, is my son. And it's symbiotic, but um yeah, so that's kind of been what I've been thinking. Like, I do believe that by and large, that humans, and specifically Americans, that they totally missed the boat on it, and they are just a bunch of carbon copies of each other in a lot of ways, just with different names, or different hair colors. And it's like, man, like, there's more, right? That it's not just getting up and working 9 to 5 every day, giving your life away for a year to have 2 weeks to yourself. And on those 2 weeks, you wonder, what do I do with my time? Because you don't even have an identity outside of your workplace. Like, I, I think about that kind of stuff a lot.
Yeah.
And like, and the reason I think about it is because I feel, I'm not worried, but I just feel bad. I feel bad that so many people are content to just exist that way. Like, so, like the parallel of the Matrix, like they have no idea, that this isn't real, right? But to just continue going on like that, it's like, hey, like you don't have to work yourself to death and be on your deathbed and be like, oh, thank God I finished that spreadsheet. you know like, break out and live.
So in a wonderful culmination of a meandering pathway through a garden of conversation, there's a spectrum between deep fulfillment and chaotic, confused, unfulfilled life. And this term for me is what my testimony for Christ immediately connects me to. Is I was told by God to basically look at what does it mean to miss out on nothing. My I look forward to you reading the book that I just wrote, and when you have some time, if you're into audiobooks, maybe I get that to you. Um, but God literally told me I was depressed. I was 21, and I was a nocturnal creature at that point, and I kept hearing this repeating phrase that for me, I prayed every night. I was a biblical student, and I very much identified as a Christian. And I would literally hear in response to my prayers a voice that said, "Stare at the moon until you know me."
Mm.
And I was like, what kind of mysterious metaphor is that?
Yeah.
And the more I did, I looked at this thing, this scenario, and I realized I'm not looking at moonlight. Moonlight isn't, there's no such thing as moonlight. But if you didn't understand the thing that you're looking at, you'd think, oh, that's producing light. Like if you were a caveman, you walked up into the world and you're like, wow, that lamp is on fire up top. It's like, no, you're misunderstanding technology. That it's electricity is flowing through some current as a light bulb is a complicated thing. The
Mhm.
moon is not creating light. It's reflecting it from a source that's currently from this moment vantage point unseen. But if you
Mhm.
understand the source of the light, this mechanism now has more, you can understand what it's doing now.
Mhm.
And I looked at that, and then I was shown the metaphor of someone depressed and someone who, and then that's when my friend took his own life. And I was really, really confused as to like the whole free will conversation was really intense for me at that age. But the thing that Christ really put in my heart was to stare at this concept called FOMO,
Mhm.
and that there is this spectrum, and it's in all of us and it's in all humanity, of the feeling that you're missing something, the feeling that you're fragmented, and the feeling that you're separate from how you should be or how you'd like to be, or how you should be. It doesn't matter the should or the would or the could. It's just feeling there's something off, there's something wrong, there's something missing,
Yeah.
inherent that's needing to be present.
Like you
And
haven't stepped into like what the thing for you is in your life.
yes, and then it also gets extremely minute too, because FOMO happens on a daily basis. And how I teach it when I teach Raja Yoga is, can you imagine a moment where you are more clear than when you just ate a huge Mexican burrito and you now have to take a violent poop?
Or, you'd think like about, should I eat another burrito? It's like, no, it's the last thing I'm going to do in my life right now is eat another burrito.
Well, where I take it is basically think of how clear you are when you just ate a bunch of food and you know you need to poop.
Yeah.
You're so clear. There's
Right.
no one needs, you don't need counseling, you don't need like a mentor, no
You
one
don't
needs,
need advice.
no one's in between you, and there's only one choice. You
Right.
know, you even look at a diction. If you're in a traveling, you're like, yo, El Ban, like
Right.
ASAP, Don, like the only one thing I need to know.
Mhm.
And if spirituality and our not just spirituality like it's up in the clouds, but our integral, functional, everyday, living, embodied psycho spiritual process, if it could be as simple as when we know we need to poop,
Mm.
then no one would ever be missing anything. However, it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah,
And
it is.
we're functioning through, influenced by our mother and father and cultural belief systems and blah, trauma. I wasn't loved. There's a couple of things other than that
Right.
happening.
That's right.
However, that term FOMO, I'm parched. I
Hmm.
felt that there was an absence of hydration.
Yeah.
It inspired it. Now, I didn't hesitate, and the gap filled immediately. Even as soon as I became aware of the need for this thing, its absence was actually a gift, because in its absence, I simultaneously became aware of its resolution.
Hmm.
Now, for me, this creates an opportunity to be fully reflective. Well,
Yeah.
you're constantly live. Your Wi-Fi is high level bandwidth, and you're never a step behind of what's needed. I mean, imagine go back a month or so into our thick of being on tour,
Mhm.
and it's like 5 p.m. Let's just say, like, Frank's audio check didn't go well for whatever reason. Rocco has not got laundry back. Security said that there was a glitch. Now it's 6:30. We needed those things done way yesterday.
I'm
We're
like, hey,
all
where's the photo and the pin drop for our arrival?
all that. We need these things long ago.
Hmm.
There's no delay in the response to what's needed, and it creates, I think, embodied immediacy.
Hmm.
And to me, that's a more micro level of what it is to miss out on nothing, is to never miss a beat. And you're not missing even the things are missing, but you're not missing out on what's needed. You're on it. You're reflected. I'm adhering to what's needed. Um, so it to me is a profound thing to contemplate and to notice and to zoom in on, and look at, is what does it mean to miss out on nothing in the grander scale?
Yeah.
What does it mean to not miss? And obviously miss, sin, but it's like that to me is also kind of why there's some cobwebs in, the Roman Catholic Christian lineage. Is like, well, shit, am I wrong then that I've missed something? Well, hold on a second. Now we're getting into some implications. Let's just notice that it's absent, or that you feel that it's absent, or that
Or
you
was it necessary to my journey in life that I miss it?
right, or that you subjectively perceive that it's not present, and that bothers you.
Yeah.
So I'll capstone in this fun meandering with, what do you feel, Brent Oakley, that it what does it mean to miss out on nothing?
It it comes down to the interpretation of the question. So what does it mean to miss out on nothing? That the opposite of that would be that you experience everything, as far as the literal sense in the English language. To miss, well, you
Mm-hmm.
don't miss. You experience, you achieve. Nothing, everything. So you have everything, right? To miss out on nothing. Um, However, you could look at it like, what does it mean to miss out on nothing? It means that I am entirely content. I'm satisfied. I'm fulfilled. And I have all that I need.
That to me is a pretty sound description. And if for me personally, if I walk into daily life like that, I'm aware of what I've been endowed with by the infinite creative intelligence that permeates all things. And no matter the situation in front of me, whatever's absent is surely at arm's reach to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is a fulcrum kind of vantage point of how to stay inspired, is to notice, who would I need to be if nothing was missing?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you do that in your various walks of life, from fatherhood to gardener to landscaper to manager to artist, to which, I mean, just to go into a very small micro focus of that macro idea, is that not exactly what sound design is? It's echolocation. Something's hot. There's something bright in the. Can we pan? Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's too much now in the mid. All right, dial that frequency. It's in like 400 to 5. It's too hot. It's all this super sensitive awareness to what's present and what's needed,
Yeah.
and the negotiation between those two until the stabilization of what's most ideal or as close to perfect as we can get occurs.
Yeah, I feel like there's such a lesson that could be taken away from that specifically because when you're mixing live sound, every single room is different.
Mm.
And so while what is coming out of the speakers, what's coming from the stage, it could be the same exact thing every single day, every single night, meaning it's the same artist, it's the same note, it's the same song, whatever. But the environment is never the same. It's always different every single day. And that can mean any number of things, either that it's harsh or that it's dull or that it's boomy or that's, all these different things that one thing that is constant is encountering that's making it a variable. And, you so we correct, we balance. And, I feel like there's a deep takeaway there if we can see it between like our own lives and how we carry ourselves and every encounter and experience that we have in life. Maybe you can connect that.
With mixing,
Just, like finding that profound lesson that exists there, like this transcendental idea between like, how you have something that is the same every single day in an area that is never the same twice, and we correct and we balance to try to make that as accurate and as similar from how it's intended to be received as we possibly can in the midst of an environment that is totally fighting it.
what a profound metaphor.
Yeah.
I'd say that's the backbone of the I think it's like this old Buddhist story or something like that, but it's like a or maybe it's like a Native American like like wisdom phrase or something, but I forgot the lineage where it comes from, but it's the statement, I'm sure you heard it. It's like it's impossible there no person can step in the same river twice or something
Yes.
like that, because you're not the river's constantly changing. It's a different river every second, but then
Yeah.
that means that you also are different every few minutes. So there's never going to be another time where you're stepping in that same river the same exact way.
That's right.
And although all we have is 1 minute at a time, 1 second at a time, 1 day at a time, it's the same thing. Breath, body, life, bills, stuff. But why is it always different? It's the same stuff, but it's always different. And then
Yeah.
there's how our choices, the same choice on a Monday, come Tuesday, oh my God, it's not working. The
Mhm.
feedback of that same note played in the same way brings back an incredibly different environmental response. And I feel like that is it's a really cool metaphor that you probably spend a lot of time zooming in on, but
Yeah.
it requires live participation, I'd say. And
Hmm.
and default settings only go so far.
Yeah.
Preconceived notions only go so far. And then there's nothing that can no AI can beat, I don't think as of right now at least,
Yeah.
a live human responding to what's needed.
Not yet.
Not yet, I'll say.
But as this podcast is going to experience itself, it's getting closer every day.
Closer every day. True, true.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you giving time, man. It's been a nice dive in on these various topics, and yeah. Is there anything else you want to zoom in on? You feel like we touched it all?
Well, I mean, we haven't touched it all. There's
Only
always
begun.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much that can be talked about, but yeah, this was a great kind of comprehensive, kind of a little bit of everything
Yeah.
dialogue that we had here, just wherever the water took us,
Yeah. There you
Yeah.
go. Well, yeah. Appreciate making the time. Anything you want to like? I don't know. Do you have any music coming out? Do you have anything you want to tune anybody into, or be like, yo, check my link out?
No, I mean, my Instagram, it's Brent Oakley, BrentOkuley, and you can kind of get a glimpse of the variety in my life between working in the music industry, being a dad, working on motorcycles, doing landscaping projects, DIY stuff. It's just all across the board. Occasionally, I put music up there that I do that eventually makes its way out, you know. Like I just recorded myself the other day playing a song, you know, completely just live, like in front of my phone. So, like, no production whatsoever, just raw. And sometimes it's important to get it out like that. But
Mhm.
yeah, besides that, my property, it's the Palmetto Estate. It's in Palmetto, Florida, and hoping to have weddings here in the near future. In the meantime, you know, I'm grateful and thankful for everything I've experienced in my life, everything that's brought me to where I am and made me who I am, and conversations like this with people like yourself and relationships that have just come out of nowhere as a result of different um, choices that have been made and opportunities that have been seized. You know, so
Well said. Well, amen to that. Thank you, sir. And thanks for tuning in. That
yeah,
concludes
buddy.
today's journey.